Hello and welcome to day 2 of the International Pure Conference for the Americas, Europe, and Africa. My name is Tina Moyer and I'm Senior Director of Academic Partnerships, and I will be your moderator for track 2 today. This session will be talking about managing the research application process at Queen's University of Belfast. And throughout the presentation, you can submit your questions to the speakers by using the live Q&A button located either at the bottom of your screen or on the right of your screen. And time permitting, we will cover Q&A at the end of each presentation. Now I'd like to introduce this session's speakers. We have Johannes Ferber, founder and managing director of Black Deckel, and Nicholas Blease, program manager of research systems programs at Queen's University of Belfast. Johannes and Nicholas, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tina. So my name, as Tina said, is Nicholas Blease. I'm joined by Johannes Ferber from Black Deckel. So I'll just run through our presentation. So where we want to start is where we were in 2014 and when we kind of embarked on this process that we were going through. So our capabilities at the time were we had Pure as our research information system. We had a Unit 4 Aggresso finance system, and we had a bespoke in-house grants management system. But really what that involved was academics manually notifying the finance office if they wanted to submit an application. They would process the application and then send emails for approval to submit the application or accept the awards. At that time as well, all academic staff had access to PFACT, which was our costing and pricing tool at the time, which I think is quite widely used across the sector. So some of the issues that we had in 2014 were our teams were quite siloed, using processes and systems on their own. The directorates between finance and research and enterprise were quite siloed, and there was a lack of effective communication and visibility between the two. There was no academic interface to the grants management system. That led to a lot of deviation from due process, such as approvals being signed off after the event. Our costing and pricing was done through PFACT at that time was unsupported. The system was unsupported, so we had no real guarantee that our costing and pricing was accurate, and the pricing templates and system rules hadn't been really updated in a number of years. So we had limited capability to really understand how accurate our prices were and what the application pipeline looked like. So what were our objectives when we set out on this journey? Overall, we wanted to have adherence to due process and to provide a quick and efficient service for academic colleagues. We wanted to understand our application pipeline and to be able to focus our resources to the areas that needed the most focus. And we needed to improve communication and sharing of data and information across teams and directorates, so everybody knew what the current state of play was in any given application, which would lead to reduced risk and improve the accuracy and completeness of our data. And we also wanted to align with our institutional targets and goals. So how did we go about it? Well, we had an existing program board, which was made up of research and enterprise staff, some finance staff, information services, and a few senior academics. And we commissioned a new project, which we call our Research Interfaces Project, which looked at how finance and research and enterprise interface with each other. The initial part of that was to do a market assessment of the options. And we weren't sure whether we would procure one solution, which would do both costing, pricing, and application management, or we would be looking at two different solutions at that time. We also didn't know whether it was going to be an in-house bespoke solution or commercial off-the-shelf product or a combination of the two. So we were really at that early stages looking to identify the vision of what we wanted to achieve and outline the solution, and that market assessment was key to that. So some of the decisions that we reached from that market assessment, we realized that the scale of the requirements were so varied that no one provider was able to provide it all at that time. So we decided that two integrated solutions is the best approach. At the time, we decided that the research application management would be the best starting point, and decided to build out on our existing bespoke in-house system. And mainly the main driver for that was how it already integrated with back-end solutions. And it was the focus of that was mainly about integrating and controlling processes and communications and data that were specific to our institution. The second phase was then to procure and integrate a costing pricing solution into that. And that was different in that costing and pricing is a very complex process, but is defined, and we wanted to go for an off-the-shelf solution for that aspect of it. So how did we evolve the solution? We agreed on our due process between our two directorates. We agreed on what the key triggers for engagement of academic staff were at each point in the process. And we then introduced these kind of academic interface into application management. And from that, we had standard workflows and triggers to different support teams across finance and research and enterprise and other directorates to notify them when relevant information was available in the application management solution for them to go and provide some support. And then once we procured Black Dackle, we integrated that into the whole process and then built out our target KPIs from that. So I'll hand over to Johannes at this point, and just he will talk through how the integration works.
Thanks, Nick. So the key trigger for engagement and the only data that academics need to evaluate the feasibility of a bid initially is the total cost. So that was the starting point, a single figure, very minimalistic. Now at Queen's, the academic-facing application system is called RAS, and that's where academics enter key details about their application. And a cost estimate is then calculated by Black Dackle via a real-time web service integration. And the way this works is by automatically creating a skeleton budget in Black Dackle based on the data entered in RAS. And this skeleton budget is then the handover point to research finance, who further amend and refine the budget directly in Black Dackle as needed. And eventually, a detailed funder report is created in Black Dackle and shared with the academic. And there's also selected budget data pulled from Black Dackle into other corporate systems via web services, but we're omitting that here for simplicity. Back to Nick.
Okay. So I'll just give you a quick demonstration of how that operates. So this is our research application system. It's actually a test version of it. So the applicant fills in all the necessary details for the application, who's involved in it, if there are any additional non-pay elements or new staff, and they basically can click and calculate that estimate cost, and it goes off to Black Dackle and does the cost estimate, and they can update this a number of times, so that if they want to make amendments, and we'll come back with the estimate cost. And this is a proxy cost that that doesn't give exact salaries, so there's no gaming of the system that can be done in that regard. Because I have an administrator here, I can log in directly into Black Dackle, so our finance staff can log directly into the costing and pricing solution. We don't let our academic staff go into that solution, because it's really, we regard that the costing and pricing element as needing defined skills, and we want to control the process, so we eliminate them from that. But that basically goes into Black Dackle, and they have project record automatically created with the default budget from the data that's been entered at that point. And I'll hand over to Johannes at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. So I want to spend a few minutes in Black Dackle to give you a taste of the system, and along the way point out a few things that are relevant in the context of integrations, also specifically in the context of an integration with Pure. Secondly, in the setup that we have just been presenting shortly at QUB, as Nick said, academics don't have direct access to Black Duckle. However, there is specific support available in Black Duckle also for providing, let's say, limited data views to, for example, academics to take into account data protection concerns. Academics should not see everything, for example, not necessarily detailed pay details of all their fellow staff members, but the system should still provide enough access to get work done. And I also want to show a quick example of that. So if we open a project, and I'm not going into details here, this is a funded project. We can have multiple budgets held against that project. We only have one here, and we can later promote that further in the process. And what we see in that budget is we see a couple of non-staff costs, we see facility costs, and for illustration, we are gonna create some staff costs, namely we're gonna staff one existing member of staff on that project and one new post, so someone who's not yet in the HR system. So let's take our existing member of staff. We see the staff details here as they have been pulled from the HR system. We cannot change those. We say this is the PI. On the budget for the entire project could also only be a given project year. This is a 2-year project or some other time period. And for example, 0.3 FTE. Now, secondly, we are going to create a new post. We are selecting some pay scale and some grade on that pay scale and some point on that grade. And based on that, we have some data pre-populated for us. We have an increment date, which is the annual date on which members of staff on that pay scale are being promoted to the next point. We have a pension scheme also pre-populated from the data held against the pay scale. And this is, let's say, a researcher. Now, if we look what the system has calculated for us in the background, we see that there is a whole lot of different cost elements here. We have salaries, we have pensions, we have national insurance, and we have some other cost elements. They could all be overridden individually. We're not doing that here. And we have a number of FEC overheads because this is in a kind of UK context. So we have indirect costs, estate costs, and so on. Now, importantly, what we see here are the actual costs of the bid. So £363,000. Now, we don't necessarily want to give that figure to academics, at least not in the first place. That would enable all academics to see or to infer all the pay details of everyone. And I was talking about limited data views before, and we have that right here. So we are currently on something that's called the actual facet, and we have other views on the data. As an administrator, we can choose between those, but let me spend 1 minute in the system as an academic. Where we now only have access to the proxy facet. And we also see that the total cost figure is different. The reason is that all members of staff on that budget have been replaced by proxies. And those proxies don't show the actual details, but they show some averaged figures. So for our Eric Ober, for example, we see some annual salary figure that has been calculated from averaging over the grade, and that means that people can, or academics can, create cost estimates without necessarily having access to all the detailed pay figures. If at a later point in time they then need access to the actual figures, they can be given access by administrators specifically at any point in time. So I'm going back in here. Administrator. My passwords are actually safe, but this is just a test environment. And we can now give selected users access to the actual facet if at some point the budget has been reviewed, everything is okay, and just some final refinement needs to be done. So that was the story about the limited data views and access to academics. The other thing that I wanted to mention is integration and integration into Pure. If for a moment we expand that again, we see that all the cost elements carry a cost code. And that is key to the integration with Pure, because the idea is that Pure or other downstream systems, a finance system or other systems, may not need the costs in the same structure that is calculated and used by Black Duckle, but just in some other structure, by account, by cost code, whatever. And we see here that, for example, all those staff-related or pay-related costs are mapped to some cost code 1201, and our overheads are mapped to different cost codes. So this mapping can be set up, and then once that budget has been integrated into Pure, it would show up in Pure as subtotaled by those cost codes. I'm just doing that for illustration. So we are integrating that budget into Pure. And if we now were looking into Pure, we would see that budget, we would see the totals, and would be the subtotaled cost codes. The budget also has been changed in terms of access rights. So it's now restricted, which means that ordinary users would not be able to make any further changes to it because it's integrated into Pure, it shows up in reports, and it's generally not supposed to change anymore. That was a very quick run through, and I'm handing back to Nick.
Thanks, Johannes. So where are we now in 2021? So we have a consolidated single process that is used across the entire organization. And we have compliance with academic access limited to the required data and due process, and that due process is followed. And that allows us then to know what our pipeline of prospective applications and submitted applications and awards is at any one point in time. And I can give you a quick demonstration of that. So we have various different pipelines reports, but we can give, we can look and see what do we have at various different stages in terms of draft or estimate costs or submitted to funder, and we can break that out by award values or estimated prices. So really that gives us a good control over the entire process. And gives us back that one due process that we were lacking at the outset. So we'll finish there. Thank you.
Nicholas, that was quite interesting, and we're open for some questions. I have a question actually for you. You mentioned in your due process for applications and budgets. Do you guys also have a due diligence process for funders in place, or are you planning to?
Yes, we have both. So what we do, we really have a designated members of staff who look after funders. So if a new funder is requested, it goes through to them to review and categorize it. It's categorized by a number of different elements. So there are different, both internal and external categories that need to be followed as well. So there'll be some required data that they will enter and then categorize it so it comes out in the reports in the correct cost categories.
Okay. And one of the you also noted in your setup, academics have only limited control over their costing. Has that been controversial?
No, they've kind of accepted it quite readily. We thought it might be controversial to begin with, but we've kind of we laid it out that this was the process that had to be followed, and they've kind of accepted it. And we've kept the approval process consistent across all faculties and all schools, so that we're not, so everybody knows what the process is at each stage, and we're not trying to guess, do one thing for one faculty or one school and something else for another. So it's a standard process across the board, and that I think has benefited us in getting acceptance of this, and the costs and prices are the prices are provided by faculty finance very swiftly, so they get their price and they know it's accurate in a standard way.
Okay. Well, we got quite a few questions coming in right now, so we'll start at the top here. Yvonne Fox asked, which system contains the workflow for approval to submit a proposal?
So that is, in our instance, that is our research application system, which is our in-house system, but it needn't necessarily be that case. If we had used the extended rollout that Johannes had demonstrated there, it could have been Black Dactyl potentially.
Okay. We have another question from Laura Turner. What would you want to see in future developments to the interface between Black Dactyl and your pre-award system? Nicholas.
That's a good question. I'm not sure there is any.
What would Laura want to see?
Yeah.
She sure has some has some ideas.
She has ideas. So she's thinking maybe you should have some ideas as well, Nicholas.
Yeah, I think we've kind of got to where we are, and it's quite it's accepted, and we've kind of let that bed in. So I'm sure we will want to enhance it in coming months, but we just want to get that sort of period of the whole thing bedding in and working correctly established first.
Yeah, and I mean, you're hooking into the web services directly, right? And they, in principle, provide read and write access to all the data. Essentially, whether you do something over the UI or whether you employ the web services for the same thing doesn't make a difference. So any enhancements in the integration would possibly be enhancements of the system itself, of the system capabilities. And of course, we're looking into that on an ongoing basis.
We have another question, and I think we have time for that. Emma Taylor presents, are you doing or producing much reporting from Black Dactyl, Nicholas?
So what we are doing is we're pulling the data down from Black Dactyl directly into our research application system, and from there we're producing our reports, our corporate research reports in Power BI, but we're using the web services to do that. But aside from that, there are funder reports that funders will require. So they're in the format that funders require for the submission of research applications. So those are generated directly out of Black Dactyl. We didn't really demonstrate those other than in the integration slide, but there are a whole suite of those that Johannes's team have developed that are specific to the pricing templates and the funder rules for different funders. So that our finance team and our academics get exactly the right report that they need for submission to the funder.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you all. We're running out of time. So I'd like to thank Nicholas and Johannes for a great presentation. We're going to take a 20-minute break and grab a cup of coffee and visit the Expo Gallery. And I would encourage all the participants to head to the Expo Gallery, where you can also have further discussions with Black Deckel, who happens to also be there as well. And we also have our Elsevier support team there, and many of the user communities as well have booths there. So we hope you will join us in the Expo Gallery. And Nicholas, thank you so much. Johannes, thank you for a great discussion. And I hope to see you guys back here in the next 20 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.